So hopefully you enjoyed this video and learned a little bit about John Gottman's theory about the four horsemen of the apocalypse. I thought we should spend a little bit of time talking about the components in a little bit more detail. So, and then I thought I'd add in a little bit of his research data into how he came to the conclusion that there are certain, communication styles that can be really disruptive. So he first presented his research in 1994, and he had studied married couples who he brought into his lab at the University of Washington and asked them to sit facing each other, and each of them had a camera pointed at them so that when he went to analyze the data at the end, he could place the two speakers right next to each other in the video feedback, and he could watch the reactions of each member of the pair at the same time. And so he watched couples interacting with each other after having been prompted to talk about something that had been a hot button issue for them in the past 2 weeks. And for most couples, there's something that'll fit that category. And for most couples, it's still not completely resolved. And so they may have some, discourse about whatever the subject was now that they've been prompted to return to this subject, right? So he was able to get a lot of couples having, a disagreement or an argument right there in the lab. So he reviewed the videos and he made predictions about which couples he thought would be divorced. And then he just waited. And what he discovered was that the presence of these four horsemen of the apocalypse predicted divorce within 5.6 years. And he was like 90% accurate in his predictions. Now, of course, an interesting thing might be popping into your head, like, if this guy's a clinical psychologist who works with couples, like, doesn't he have an obligation to warn them that he thinks that they may have these, bad communication styles that might lead to divorce? He was doing research. They knew full well that, he was not going to follow up with anything. And so while even some of the couples were a little bit after the fact saying, well, if you saw this coming, why didn't you, help us? Because like, I was doing research. Now that now I'm in my therapist hat. If you would like to come to my workshops, you're more than welcome. But during the research, he needed to just sort of let it play out and see whether his predictions were accurate or not. So what did he find? So he found that criticism is one of the four horsemen. This idea that we phrase things in a harsh way. You do this. You're disappointing. You always, those kinds of things. That's what he meant by criticism. Contempt. It's like that eye roll. Here's a, sneer, right? A lot of contempt is conveyed through body language, facial expressions, and tone of voice. If you think back to times when your mom told you, don't take that tone with me, what she meant is you're sounding pretty contemptuous, right? You're sounding pretty snotty, she might have said. And it's one thing for a child to act like that with their mom, but it's a whole other thing for people who are supposed to be in a love relationship to treat each other like that. Children should not be treating their moms like that. So just FYI, if you still live at home, it's not nice to roll your eyes at your mom or give her a sneer. But it definitely is not nice to do that to somebody who you're supposed to care about. And a lot of times contempt comes after protracted periods of criticism, right? So that the person who's been criticizing and criticizing and criticizing ultimately comes to the place of experiencing contempt for their partner because their partner isn't living up to whatever their standards are. So, the person who's been criticizing usually becomes the one who is contemptuous. Sorry, wrong direction. So then our next one is defensiveness. And a lot of times this is what is displayed by the person who's being criticized all the time, right? What's that funny look for? You think my girlfriend's an airhead, don't you? As he's got a face painted on a balloon. Defensiveness is when you feel like you're under attack, and so you feel like you have to defend yourself. And what Gottman is pointing out is that if you're in a healthy relationship, you won't feel the need to defend yourself against your life partner, right? You'll see yourself as members of the same team, and you'll realize I should always give my life partner a little grace. Like maybe they said something a little harshly, but I know them and I know that they love me and I know they didn't mean that. And so I don't have to be defensive about it. I can just say, something else, like, for example, use some active listening and say, you sound kind of upset. Are you mad at me, or is there something else going on? Right? Like, just a little, if you're not already angry too, it's a lot easier to be, active listening and ask them to, explain what they're feeling. If you're already angry, of course, you're going to be defensive, or you might counterattack, right? The final thing that the person who's been criticized and so much contempt has been shown might do is stonewall. And here we have an executive at Stonewall Inc. And he says, I actually fail to see where this is I fail to see where this is leading, and I no longer wish to continue this conversation. He's going to hang up the phone. Stonewalling is where the person feels like, you know what, this is hopeless. I'm just going to clam up and we're not going to talk about this anymore. I might leave, walk away because I don't want to talk about this anymore. And stonewalling really it's not the cool off period that can be a benefit that goes along with sort of having maybe a volatile, confrontation style. And maybe we both have decided, you know what, let's just cool off and come back and talk about this again later. It's like this agreement that, you know what, we're getting a little heated. Let's come back later. In stonewalling, one member of the dyad has decided just to not participate anymore. And in Gottman's lab, they would literally sit in their chair, look away from their partner, a lot of times with their arms crossed, their legs crossed, maybe doing a little jiggle of their foot. You know what I'm talking about. You can't see me, but you probably can see the little pantomime that I'm doing because you've seen people do it. And they're just not going to talk. In heterosexual couples, 85% of the time, the stonewaller is the male partner. A lot of times the female partners will use a lot of criticism words, and male partners will use a lot of contemptuous body posture. So in those ways, there can be sex differences. And then definitely males tend to be stonewallers much more often than females are stonewallers. So what Gottman found is, all of us probably resort to some of these things. I know I catch myself sometimes being critical of my husband or feeling defensive if he says something. In fact, we just had an interaction today that made me feel defensive, even though we're on the same team. But what Gottman says is that you don't have to have a relationship that is pure and clear of these negative conversation styles. What you want to have is a positive ratio. So he found that those couples who stayed together had a 5-to-1 ratio of positive to negative interactions, whereas those who broke up had a 0.8-to-1 ratio of positive to negative reactions. So what you can see is that in the couples that broke up, they were slightly more engaged in negative interactions than they were in positive interactions. Whereas in the happy couples that stayed married, it was much more positive. Married couples in their positivity, while they might have a criticism for their partner, the person who delivers the criticism might then soften it with a self-deprecating joke. For example, they might criticize and say, when your parents were scheduling their trip to visit us, you didn't tell me, and you left me, to greet your parents on a surprise with the house not clean, and it's so embarrassing, and I can't believe you would treat me like that, and sort of like some criticism, and then say, sort of at the end, I guess maybe that means I need to keep the house cleaner ahead of time, or I need to crack the whip on you to get you to cleaning up the house, or, the little joke to like lighten the mood at the end of it. So I have this criticism, but I'm going to soften it with this shared humor. Maybe they'll pull up an old, one of those you had to be there kind of jokes, right? Those kind of things that then will bring the couple back together. See, I'm still on your same team. I have this criticism I want to lodge, and maybe if I had thought more carefully, I would have couched it in one of the more, positive ways of delivering news instead of criticism. But, I didn't have that completely together, but I am going to soften it with a more positive message at the end. So Gottman has found a lot of different aspects of communication leading to, happy marriages or unhappy ones, or couples that break up, or couples that stay together. He's actually gotten so famous for this that he's retired from the University of Washington and now has set up the Gottman Center on one of the San Juan Islands in the Puget Sound. And I looked it up because I thought, well, that would be fun. Maybe you could go spend a weekend going to, John Gottman's relationship course. And I found out it was $3,000 a person for the weekend. And I was like, oh, I guess I'm not going. But, it seems like he's got an okay, sort of system going on over there now. So what Gottman says that we should do of course, we all have times when we need to communicate to the person who we care about that, we need something else from them, right? And we could do it in the form of criticism, but he says it's better to do it. The positive way to do it is to just, sort of lodge a complaint. I'm not sure that complaint sounds all that much more positive, but these are his terms. So what he means is a complaint would be something like, I feel like I'm not being heard. Can we talk about my day? Whereas a criticism would be something like, you always talk about yourself. Do you even care about my day? The complaint might be, I feel exhausted. I need you to pick the kids up from school this afternoon. Whereas a criticism would be, you never pick up the kids from school. Why is it always my responsibility, right? Like you can see on the criticism side, it's, for one thing, it's really easy for me to read it with like this adamant tone and kind of petulant, right? And you can see that they're all sort of fighting words, right? It's an attack. A complaint, I feel like I've been missing you lately. Can we schedule a date night? As opposed to, you are so emotionally unavailable lately. You'll notice on the criticism side, all of the phrases start with you. On the complaint side, all the phrases start with I. They actually start with I feel. I would like to suggest that it's not always, like I feel a lot of times we'll be greeted by a partner who's like, your feelings are, aren't reality or something like that. I know some people who are like super concrete about things. And if you say, well, I feel like this, then they'll say, well, I feel like something different. So we're obviously on a different page. So maybe better even than I feel would be something like I need, right? I need to talk to you. I miss you. And I really need to talk to you. Right. Or, I'm exhausted, like not I feel exhausted. I am exhausted. I really would appreciate it if you could pick the kids up from school this afternoon, right? Like it doesn't have to always be about your feelings per se. It could be about what you need, right? And that sounds different than the word feel. So some people will respond better to the word need than feel. The key thing is you don't want to start your sentences with you because it sounds like an attack, and then absolutely take out words like always and never, because now we get to discuss the one time that I did care about your day or the time I did pick the kids up from school, right? So you can't say never because I did. You can't say always because there was that time I didn't. And so that's really not what the point is, right? The point is I need to talk to you. I need you to show interest in what I'm doing, right? And that's, when you phrase it like that, it's a lot easier to get the other person to want to fulfill your request. Whereas with the criticism phrasing, it makes them want to defend themselves from what appears to be an attack. So that's my sort of rephrasing of John Gottman's rephrasing for positivity. All right, I'm going to take a break here and actually, hold on real quick. I'm going to, take a break right here, and we will come back in the next segment and we'll talk about barriers to self-disclosure and then maybe some unhealthy aspects of relationships. So we'll come back for that in the next segment.